Welcome to Las Vegas. We're talking Mountain West men's basketball with some of the guys that know this league the best, longtime beat reporters in the Mountain West. Geoff Grammer of the Albuquerque Journal, Mark Anderson of the Las Vegas Review-Journal, and Mark Zeigler, the beat reporter for the San Diego State Aztecs with the San Diego Union-Tribune. Appreciate you guys making some time for us. What an exciting time it is for the Mountain West. A banner year, likely going to have a top 10, maybe a top 5 team preseason, first time. Have another team in San Diego State that'll be top 35, and then some challengers that really are going to push those teams at the top. Mark, give me an idea of where San Diego State is in chasing Nevada. They got a preseason vote. Nevada was not.
Me. We try to figure out who it was.
Well, maybe we'll do some investigative journalism. But Nevada, not a unanimous pick. Why is San Diego State thought to be chasing this team in Nevada that nationally is thought to be a powerhouse program?
Well, I think two things. The way San Diego State finished last year, they won 9 straight games to get into the NCAA tournament and then almost beat Houston, a team that took Michigan right to the wire, and we saw where Michigan went. And so I think a lot of people say, wow, they're pretty close. A lot of people coming back. But the other thing is, within that 9-game win streak, they beat Nevada twice. And they didn't just beat them, they beat them handily. In fact, the second game in the Mountain West Conference tournament in the semifinals, they were up 30. And so I think that's one of the reasons people look at them and say, well, you know, they match up pretty well with those guys. They got a lot of people coming back. They have a bunch of very talented, long, tall freshmen. They might be the one team that can give them some trouble.
Mark, here in the state of Nevada, and talking with Menzies, Marvin Menzies, he said that this is great for the rivalry between the Runnin' Rebels and the Wolfpack. How good is this Nevada team in comparison to the league right now?
It's clearly the best team. It's not head and shoulders like Mark was saying. San Diego State's good enough to not only challenge them, but to beat them, but it's still Nevada's conference to lose. I think everyone would be fairly shocked if they don't win this conference. That said, Eric Musselman said it today, they have some challenges. He's got depth. He didn't have depth before. Now guys are going to be fighting over minutes, and that could cause some problems where, you know, maybe you get some turmoil in the locker room you didn't have before because guys don't think they're playing enough. Maybe there's external pressures. Parents are calling saying, how come what's going on? How come he's not playing more than 12 minutes a game? So you don't know how that's going to play out. But if looking at purely on paper, you know, they're the team to beat, and it's not really that close.
These are very important markets to the success as a league in San Diego and Las Vegas and Albuquerque. Geoff, the Lobos made it to the Mountain West Championship game a year ago. They've got some transfers that have come in. Where are the Lobos in their chase in getting back to the top? They won multiple championships not too long ago, made a championship game. Where are the Lobos in their chase for the top dog in the Mountain West?
A lot closer than people would have thought a year ago at this time. Picked 9th a year ago. They end up finishing 3rd in the regular season, and like you said, getting to that title game. I think what last year's Lobos team had that this year's team has to prove it has is sort of that buy-in. They were tough. They were working hard, probably working harder than a lot of teams in the league by the end of the season, just to kind of catch up because they didn't have the talent. What this year's team has is a lot more talent than it did last year. I would say, in covering the Lobos, this is the most talented, certainly the most athletic team since at least the 2013-14 Lobo team that had Cameron Bairstow, Alex Kirk, Kendall Williams, Hugh Greenwood. They went to the NCAA tournament. That was Craig Neal's first year. The year before that, they also had Tony Snell. So that era of the Lobos, this team has that athleticism, certainly that length, and maybe even more depth than those teams had. So the pieces are there. Now, there's no way to know at this point if they're going to buy in and kind of play as hard as they did last year. And that was really the key of that run last year, was just how they were playing.
And we saw them play in the Mountain West Championship game against the Aztecs, and the Aztecs return some stellar players, and Jalen McDaniels tested the NBA waters. He's coming back. Jeremy Hemsley, who took a minimized role coming off the bench, he's now back in the starting lineup. Are the Aztecs poised to get right back to where they were last year into the NCAA tournament?
Well, they're talented enough, and they have all the pieces. But again, it's like any team. You know, every year is different, and there's a lot of chemistry that has to happen. And whether that's at Nevada, that's at San Diego State, that's at New Mexico, UNLV, anywhere, it comes down to a lot of chemistry and see how those pieces fit together. The one thing about San Diego State is they're a very young team, maybe the youngest they've had in a long time. They only have 11 players. that are eligible to play this year, 8 of them are freshmen or sophomores. They've kind of gone away from their old model of just being transfer U. These are all players they brought in and they're trying to nurture through the program. That said, 2 of the freshmen, Nathan Mensah and Agwek Arope, I would keep an eye on. They are very, very good, and I think will have an impact this year, big impact. If they can integrate them with Jalen McDaniels, 2 senior guards. Matt Mitchell started 30 games last year. They've got guys who came off the bench. They have a 4th-year junior, Nolan Lorraine. If they can integrate those freshmen into that group, I think they could have a pretty strong, probably 8-man rotation.
You mentioned transfers, and in talking to all the coaches, that's become so key to the success of college basketball as a whole, but specifically this league. Mark, in your time covering the league, how did we get to this point where transfers are really hold the key to your success of your program, and they're only here for a year or 2, but that's how you win?
Well, that's certainly how Nevada's winning, right? I think with the league going to the Mountain West, where it's not the ACC, where you're automatically going to get the top high school players every, at least if you're like a Duke or one of the top programs, you know, this is the way you have to go about it if you want to be an elite program. And Musselman's like taking it and putting it on steroids. You know, he's built his entire program that way. And that's kind of where he's gone, where other coaches have been hesitant to go. And he's proven that you can get it done, because, you know, the big fear about going that route is you don't get the chemistry, you don't get all the years out of you want to get, and so you don't know how it's going to play in the locker room. You don't know if it's really going to work, but he's proven it can work. Now I think he's done more than just load up a transfer. He's looked for the right kind of transfers. He's looked for guys who fit into what he's trying to get done, and that's really hard to do. But he's found a way to do it, and I don't know how much you can really replicate what he's done. I just don't think it's that easy to do. So I don't know that it's automatically going to be the trend that everyone's going to start doing it that way, because I don't know that everyone can. But he's found the right formula for him. Now, whether it worked for UNLV, I don't know that it necessarily would. You know, I don't know. You know, Air Force couldn't get away with it, obviously. You know, maybe a Colorado State it could work really well for. So it really depends on the program.
Oh, New Mexico is heavy into this game as well, and they're going to have some big-time transfers that'll be big impact players.
Well, New Mexico's been built on transfers as long as any team in the league. You'd go back to national scoring champion Reuben Douglas early in the Mountain West years, transferred from Arizona. Danny Granger, J.R. Giddens through the years. More recently, Elijah Brown, Tim Williams. Those were all transfers. New Mexico's gone this route for many years, but it's been 1 or 2 pieces to the puzzle. This year they had 3 they were counting on. One of them, Jaquan Lyles, he's the transfer from Ohio State, already ruptured his Achilles. That's obvious. He's not going to play this year. That obviously hurt the team, but they're still counting on newcomer of the year, Vance Jackson. He's a transfer from UConn who started there. And Carlton Bragg will be eligible by the time league play starts. He'll be eligible mid-December. He's a transfer from Kansas that had made a 1-semester stop at Arizona State. So UNM's been doing this for a while, and we were talking about this earlier. Paul Weir and I have had this conversation. It's when you're recruiting and when you're building a team, first of all, it's a copycat league. Every sport is. So what Musselman's doing, people are going to try and do. I don't know if it's going to work, but people are going to try it. But what Paul Weir and I had a conversation about, when you're building a team, if you kind of prioritize how to build a team nowadays, getting that freshman right out of high school really isn't worth it to a lot of coaches if it's going to take 2 or 3 years before they even see the court. If you look at last year's Lobo team, Joe Furstinger ended up being one of their best players. Well, he was a 4th-year guy. Coaches can't afford to wait 4 years sometimes to get 1 year, 4 scholarship years to get 1 year of playing. So the transfer route, you know they've already played against Division I players. You might have to wait 1 year, but you know that second year they're D1 ready. So unless you're getting top 50 to top 80 level high school freshmen, it might be actually better to go to the junior college or transfer route when you're a coach at a school that doesn't have patience anymore. And not a lot of schools do. If you have to turn around a winner within 2 or 3 years, transfer is probably the route to go, and Eric's sort of showing that.
I think what happened too in the league is that Steve Fisher started it with New Mexico as well, but Steve Fisher went from a 5-23 team in their first year of the Mountain West to going to the NCAA tournament 6 straight years. And he did it with transfers. Tony Bland was one of them. Randy Holcomb was another. Xavier Thames was one. Josh Davis was one. And he built the program that way, and they started getting that, acquire that reputation. And exactly what you said, it's a copycat league, and teams started saying, well, that works. Now it's funny, like I said, San Diego State has gone away from that, And the 11 players who were suited up this year, 0 are transfers. They have 1 sitting out, Malachi Flynn, who's very, very good from Washington State, and that's more of the old system for them. But now you have Nevada, and Nevada's built their entire team on transfers, and I think that sort of history and legacy will continue now because of what Nevada's been able to do.
This league is better when UNLV is near the top, at the top, when Las Vegas is a basketball city, as the student athletes have told me. This is a basketball-hungry city. How close is UNLV to getting back to challenging for a Mountain West championship like we saw them not too long ago?
At this moment, I wouldn't say all that close. They're just not. They're picked 6, and that's about right. You know, their roster, they got a middle of the pack type roster. Maybe they'll prove everyone wrong and compete for the top. I don't know that I really see that. They're looking at the recruiting class the current recruiting class is a 2-man recruiting class. Yeah. A couple 3-star recruits, which you can't read too much into recruiting rankings. But I don't know that anyone's getting overly excited. I just think they got a ways to go, and Marvin Menzies is trying to build the program more, I guess, the traditional way, more with high school kids. Their starting point guard is a transfer, but he's a local kid. He's a walk-on, so he's not the typical transfer in a lot of ways. So, you know, maybe Menzies is doing more behind the scenes than everyone else is aware of, and building the program much stronger than I think is probably happening. A lot of people think is happening, but right now it doesn't look like he's really all that close. And you know, and I don't know that they're ever going to go the Nevada route and just load it with transfers. I can see them maybe getting 1 or 2, but I think their main focus still is getting high school players, and they were in on Josh Green, who's one of the top high school players in the country. They were in on Jalen Hill, another player. So those are the types of players they're still going after, and they're still hoping Christian Brown commits to them. It doesn't sound like he will, but you never know. But if they can get Christian Brown, that would be big. But that's really the route they're going. That's their route for recruiting route right they're on, and I don't really see them going away from that.
I don't think they'll be down that long, though. Do you? I mean,
but what I was going to say, I don't even mean this is it's going to come out as a backhanded compliment, but UNLV not having expectations this year, because even last year when they were, I think, still picked around 6th, but they had Brandon McCoy, they had a first place vote last year. There were still some people that thought, well, a piece like that's going to make them so much better. This might be as good for UNLV as a lot of things, not being expected to be on that top tier, or maybe even that second tier where San Diego State and New Mexico might be. UNLV, for the first time, I think, in a really long time, I don't think anybody's really expecting them to win the league, and that might be what they need, because I don't think they've handled the expectations as well as they could have sometimes. And it's not even all necessarily their fault. Sometimes fans, and I don't blame any fan for having expectations and then getting disappointed by, not realizing those expectations. But the realization is UNLV hasn't had a league championship type of roster in a long time. They've only had 1 or 2 really good pieces, and I think that clouded the vision of a lot of people. So right now, not being expected to win might be the best thing for them. And
I think, too, UNLV, San Diego State, New Mexico have a huge advantage in resources in this league, with practice facilities, with the ability to get by games with salaries and everything else that goes into a program. And so I think when you have those resources, and as opposed to a school that doesn't, it's a lot easier to get back to the top quicker. And so I think, eventually you'll see them get back up. You've seen how quickly New Mexico is getting back up. San Diego State didn't go to the tournament a couple of years ago, and now they're back to a position where, they are 1 or 2 recruits away next year. I mean, I think they'll be very good this year, but next year being very, very good, being an elite team in the country. And so I think what makes the Mountain West strong is when all those 3 sort of flagship programs are playing well, and then you add a Nevada, and then you add a Boise State, which has been consistently very good, and then you have Fresno State, and then Colorado State pops up every now and then, and I think that's what makes the league. They don't have the resources that the Big 3 do, but when they start to play well and the Big 3 is going, it makes for a very competitive league.
Well, these programs that have been successful are run by, right now, coaches that haven't been with their program at the head coaching role for very long. You look at the 2 longest tenured head coaches with their current school are Leon Rice and Dave Pilipovich. Everyone else is around 4 years or younger, at least younger when it comes to their head coaching role with that current institution. Geoff, you've spoke to all these coaches recently in Las Vegas. What is your take on where these coaches are in building the program that they want and that they hope for in their Mountain West?
I think the coach I cover most directly, Paul Weir, in his second year, got really lucky in year one to get an identity really quickly. I think that's an overlooked kind of aspect of the game to really have an identity, because they started 3-8, and because they were so bad early on, I think it actually allowed him to say, okay, look, we are what we are. Maybe we were the 9th place team. Maybe we are that bad, so I'm just going to go ahead and establish what we're doing. And by doing that, he didn't give up early on. Like, if they were 6-5 and had some marginal, some close games, he might have abandoned what he wanted to be the core of his foundation for that program, because he knew he could have won that game rather than just sticking to the press. Instead, he stuck with the press, and they got better as it went on. A lot of other coaches, I think, sometimes find it hard to find that identity and to stick with their identity, because they might be maybe better than they should be early on, and sometimes you win too many games early on. So I think that was the best thing for Paul Weir, was actually struggling, not just struggling, but they were pretty bad early in last season, and it allowed him to actually stick to his guns and say, look, this is the way we're going to do it. I think some of these other coaches, Leon through the years kind of quietly became one heck of a coach. I mean, I voted them 4th in the preseason poll, and I couldn't tell you who, I mean, I don't know who their best player is going to be. I mean, I wouldn't say.
So, you know, they got Leon Rice.
But they got Leon Rice. I mean, they don't have a guy that I think is going to sniff, certainly at the preseason time, even the second team. If we picked an all-conference team, obviously we pick 5 players each, and for the first team, would there be a player that would really even sniff the second team, maybe even third team? And yet Leon Rice and Boise State's picked 4th, because Leon has established himself as really not only just a coach that kind of figured out the league and is always going to be pretty good. He's a coach that's always in the mix, that they're always right there late in the year within 2 or 3 spots of that top spot. And I think the other coaches in the league have gained that respect, and he's earned that respect from them. He's earned it from me. I didn't always give him that kind of credit, because I was, for a while there, thinking, okay, look, they had Anthony Drimmick and Derek Marks, and they could never figure it out when they played together. That one year they had a really good run was when Drimmick got hurt, and I was like, okay, I don't want to give him too much credit, because Derek Marks took over only because Drimmick got injured, and I just wouldn't give him his due. And then all of a sudden I realized, you know what, he's a heck of a coach.
Right.
I mean, I realized it late in the game, but Leon's a heck of a coach.
Well, I think too, you know, what's interesting about this conference is it's such a unique conference with the travel demands, the altitude, the change in climate, and you know, everything you have to go through to get to games. The way it's scheduled without travel partners, and Wednesday and Saturday are always on the road. But you know, if you look around the conference, almost every coach, and Paul might be one of the few that has some sort of tie to the league. A lot of them, I mean, Brian Dutcher was, you know, on Steve Fisher's staff for the entire existence of the conference, and the new coaches, Utah State and Colorado State, both were in the league before Colorado State. Marvin Menzies was at San Diego State. Justin Hudson was at San Diego State. Even Eric Musselman, he grew up in San Diego. He grew up watching San Diego State basketball and has always followed it closely and knows the league. And didn't, you know, when he took the job, didn't have to pull out an atlas and figure out where all the cities were. He knew them. He knew the styles. He knew what he was getting himself into. And I think that's the reason you see maybe some less experienced coaches, but they're really not that underexperienced, because they understand the league, and that's a huge asset.
So you mentioned all the places that they come home to are great places to live. The Mountain West landscape includes some of the top places according to objective sources, U.S. News and World Report, and otherwise saying these are the top places in America to live. It includes a lot of Mountain West cities, so there's no wonder that they come home and find a place that they want to stay. Same time, they can't get anyone to come here to play. Scheduling is a challenge, right? It's a nice place to stay and live. It's a terrible place to visit as a visiting team. What are the challenges, Mark, that you see with trying to get teams to come here? Sometimes you got to go on the road.
It's not as big a challenge for UNLV as it is for other teams. It's the one big advantage being here is that teams actually do want to come here. And so they've been very fortunate to get some really good home and homes. They had home and home with Kansas, they had not long ago. Yeah. You know, Arizona, they had a long contract with them. So it's, for them, they're unique in that regard. That it's not like football, where, you know, football teams are real hesitant to go play mid-majors at their home cities or do, you know, home and homes. UNLV basketball, they can still do that. So they're very unique. And you're talking, and Mark mentioned earlier about because of all the resources here and tradition, all that, it's one of the teams that can get back up there quickly. They can. When I was talking about earlier, they're not close now. That doesn't mean they can't be close, you know, quickly. They get the right couple of recruits, that sort of thing. But just looking at it right now, they're a little ways away, but they do have great resources here in their practice facility. I mean, that's where Team USA practices. So it's as good a practice facility as you'll find. Thomas and Mack, 18.5. You don't get many arenas that big in college. So it's, and of course, the city itself is a big draw too.
Well, the home and homes, I can tell you, Paul Weir's tried to get a lot of them. He won't even get a call back from some of the power conference schools. And a lot of credit for all the stuff he's been in the news about. A lot of credit goes to Sean Miller, who has not only done it with New Mexico, he's done it with UNLV, he's done a home and home with San Diego State, did some regional home and homes with UTEP and with New Mexico State. Not a lot of those level coaches want to even risk that second part of the home and home where they have to go to the pit, where they have to go to, go to Fort Collins or go to Laramie. It's not happening at those level schools. I think one thing that your two markets have is great high school recruiting beds. I mean, those are hotbeds. You're going to have talent. Coaches want to go there and play in front of that junior at that local high school or local prep school. Albuquerque doesn't have that. Fort Collins maybe doesn't have that. The Denver area maybe has it more than and Colorado has a little more than Albuquerque. But a lot of the Mountain West schools, great cities to live in, as you mentioned, maybe not the biggest recruiting hotbeds for local high school talent. And I think that's actually part of it. People don't think of it in those terms that often, but I do think that the lack of high school talent in those cities has actually affected how hard it is to get teams to come play a home game there.
The last word here before we wrap up. If we can all agree that Nevada is the preseason favorite, who is the top challenger in this league?
I picked San Diego State second. I picked New Mexico third. I do think that there's a tier of those two teams, and I don't care what order you put them in. Before the injury, I had New Mexico as second. I still think they have a very good chance. I really consider those two teams pretty equal at this point. I think there's a little drop off after that. So I really think New Mexico and San Diego State both have a chance to challenge Nevada. I think both of those are NCAA caliber teams. I don't know that both of them will make the NCAA tournament from an at-large standpoint. I honestly believe the two of them, though, are, and certainly Nevada is. So we're talking three teams going into the season that I believe are NCAA caliber. It's been a long time since I've been able to really believe that going into a season that three teams I think could make it.
Yeah, I agree with what he said. Those are the two challengers, and I give San Diego State the edge. I think San Diego State has a pretty big mental edge, just because we talked about earlier, the two wins against Nevada at the end of last season, and they're both blowout wins. That's got to be huge. They're not afraid of the Wolfpack, and I don't think many teams can say that. So you have to, just that alone, I give San Diego State the edge.
I think the one issue with San Diego State is that they don't play Nevada until late February is the first time, and then they play them in the season finale in Reno. Are they going to be in the race at that point? Is New Mexico going to knock off the Wolfpack when they go down to the pit? Are they going to be within striking distance? If they're not, if either San Diego State trips up like they did last year and has a stretch where freshmen don't play well, they have an injury or two like they did last year, they could be out of it, and it might not matter. But if they can get to those, like you said, they can get to use their mental edge in those games and get to February, a game back or somewhere in the mix, it could get interesting. And they might have a shot.
Well, I think it's going to be one exciting season in the Mountain West leading up to the Mountain West Championship Tournament in Las Vegas in March. Appreciate your time. Geoff Grammer, Mark Anderson, Mark Zeigler, I'm Jesse Kurtz saying thank you for watching this presentation of the Mountain West Network.